Start with a roll call.
Sure. One moment, please. Thank you. The live stream was just taking a moment.
Okay.
All right. District 2. District 3.
Here.
Banning. Beaumont.
Here.
Calamasa.
Here.
Canyon Lake.
Here.
Cathedral City.
Here.
Coachella. Desert Hot Springs.
Present.
Lake Elsinore.
Here.
Palm Desert.
Here.
Palm Springs.
Present.
San Jacinto. I see you.
I used Bob muted. I'm sorry. I was having some problems with my screen.
All right.
Present.
Thank you. Riverside. Wildemar.
Here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item is Pledge of Allegiance. Can you please stand or join with me on the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. Okay. Item 4 is public comments. Do we have any public comments for items not listed on the agenda?
I did not receive any written comments, and I am not seeing any hands raised.
Okay, and let me jump back real quick and do some housekeeping remarks. As it is a remote meeting, please silence your other communication devices such as your cell or desk phone. This will ensure we're not hearing any feedback or causing interruption during the meeting. Also, for those on Zoom, if you'd like to make a public comment on the Zoom screen, please click on the raise hand button. If you're using Zoom on your smartphone, tap your screen, look for the more option, and then raise the raise hand button on the screen. And for those calling in using the phone line only, you can dial *9 on your keypad to signal that you'd like to comment. And with that, we'll move on to any additions or revisions.
No, sir.
Okay. And item 6 is the consent calendar. Before we take a vote on the consent calendar, does anyone wish to speak on the calendar before we take a vote? Or does anyone request an item to be pulled for later discussion? Seeing no hands raised, I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval, Cathedral City.
Second, San Jacinto.
And a roll call, please.
District 2.
Yes.
District 3.
Yes.
Beaumont.
Yes.
Banning. Calamasa.
Yes.
Canyon Lake.
Yes.
Cathedral City.
Yes.
Coachella. Desert Hot Springs.
Aye.
Lake Elsinore.
Aye.
Palm Desert.
Yes.
Palm Springs.
Aye.
San Jacinto.
Yes.
Wildemar.
Yes.
Thank you. That item does pass.
Thank you. Item 7 is state and federal legislative update, and that's report from David Knudsen.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. I'm happy to be with you this morning. Today, I will provide you with an update on state and federal legislative activities. I'll begin with the state update. The legislature concluded the first year of its 2-year session on September 10th, giving the governor until October 10th to sign hundreds of bills passed in the final days of session. The governor recently signed AB 1499, authored by Assemblymember Daley and supported by the RCTC. The bill extends the January 1st, 2024 sunset date to January 1st, 2034 for Caltrans and regional transportation agencies to use design-build procurement method for transportation projects in California. RCTC joined the Self-Help Counties Coalition in advocating for this bill. In May, RCTC adopted an opposed position on SB 261 by Senator Allen. The bill would update the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals for the transportation sector, create new vehicle miles traveled reduction goals, and increase the scrutiny of a metropolitan planning organization sustainable community strategy by the California Air Resources Board. This bill is now a 2-year bill, and RCTC staff will continue to educate our delegation on our issues with the bill throughout 2022. As I indicated in previous reports to the committee this year, the budget process was significantly different than in previous years. As part of the fiscal year 2021-22 budget approved by the legislature and signed by the governor, several transportation stimulus proposals were included as a result of the $80 billion budget surplus, with significant investments in transit, active transportation, and climate adaptation programs. However, the state budget included language that would make these funding proposals contingent on additional legislation detailing how the funds would be allocated. In the absence of such legislation, by October 11th, 2021, these funds would revert to the general fund. The governor was clear that these funding proposals were contingent on the legislature authorizing the remaining $4.2 billion in Proposition 1A high-speed rail bond funding to finish building the first 119-mile section of high-speed rail track in the Central Valley. The legislature left the funds out of the June budget, pending further negotiation. As the legislative session came to a close in early September, the legislature and the governor could not finalize an agreement on the high-speed rail funding request. As a result, all of the new funding transportation general fund spending actions were reverted back to the general fund, consistent with the Budget Act of 2021. The reversion of the general fund dollars resulted in the withdrawal of $2.5 billion from the upcoming competitive transit and intercity rail program competitive grant cycle. In addition, the reversion also includes an additional $500 million for active transportation and $400 million for climate adaptation grants, which will also no longer be available. On a positive note, the final budget does provide spending authority for an additional $2 billion for state highways and local roads. $930 million of this funding from the federal COVID-19 Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2021 and the accumulated and future interest earnings produced by SB1 programs. While most of the funds will augment state resources, an estimated $400 million will benefit local road programs. While it's anticipated that the legislative leaders and the governor will continue discussing some of these budget issues, the legislature reconvenes on January 3rd, 2022. I'll now turn to the federal update. All year, you've heard me report about efforts by Congress and the White House to pass surface transportation reauthorization legislation by September 30th deadline, when the current FAST Act, which has already been extended by 1 year, expires. You will also recall earlier this summer, the House passed its transportation bill, the Invest in America Act. By early August, the Senate passed a bipartisan infrastructure bill negotiated by a group of senators with the White House, known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA. This bipartisan bill includes a 5-year reauthorization of transportation programs, along with funding for other types of infrastructure. House Speaker Pelosi committed to considering this bipartisan Senate infrastructure bill today before September 30th, the end of the federal fiscal year deadline. In an effort to keep her timeline, debate on the bill is scheduled to start today in the House with a possible vote on Thursday. There is disagreement, however, in the House as to when the bipartisan infrastructure bill should be voted on, whether it should be now or whether it should be voted on when the larger $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill is ready to be voted on as well. While the reconciliation bill went through House committee procedures over the weekend, the bill will not be ready for a vote today. It's unclear right now how this will all play out in the House. On top of all of this activity on infrastructure issues, Congress also has to deal with the debt ceiling and the need for a continuing resolution, or CR, to keep the federal government from shutting down. Last week, the House passed a CR that includes a number of items. It funds government programs through December 3rd, includes disaster relief funding for wildfires, drought, flooding, and hurricane damage, and extends the debt ceiling until December 2022. The CR does not include an extension of surface transportation programs. Therefore, the bipartisan infrastructure bill needs to pass before September 30th, or Congress will have to find a way to extend surface transportation programs. The Senate is expected to take up the CR this week. Consideration could take place this evening. At this time, however, it is unclear if there are enough votes to pass it, given the disagreements over the temporary suspension of the debt ceiling. If a vote on the current CR in the Senate is not successful, Congress is going to have to find a compromise over their disagreements and pass a new version of the CR in order to avoid a government shutdown. The Legislative Affairs team will continue to monitor the appropriations process, particularly for RCTC's pending community project funding request in the Senate for $3 million each for the I-10 Highland Springs Interchange Improvement Project and the Reno Valley Marchfield Station Improvements Project, both submitted by Senator Padilla. Representative Calvert's $5 million request for the Smart Freeway Pilot Project is included in the appropriations bill passed by the House as well. This week will be a busy week as we look to see how Congress addresses the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the continuing resolution. It's important to note that the Legislative Affairs team has been engaged throughout the entire process. Based on the Commission's adopted state and federal legislative platform, we've worked to ensure that RCTC is eligible for new discretionary grant programs. We've requested millions of dollars in federal funding for our projects through member-directed funding, and we've met with congressional and committee staff to ensure projects like CV Rail fit within the parameters of new program funding. We'll continue our efforts until there are action on these bills. This concludes my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions or comments before we move to receive and file? Mayor Ledesma.
Thank you. I do have one question. My understanding is RCTC owns a public rural land in San Jacinto that, and the answer can be later. And within the last year and a half, it was removed on 7th Street and the land is being abandoned. However, there's been a lot of weeds and people are being kind of located there themselves. So my recommendation is for the board to consider if it's going to be an abandoned land, maybe we can donate it to the neighbor property owners. That's probably future request, so I apologize. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and receive and file the update. And we'll move on to item 8, which is the 2022 State Transportation Improvement Program Adopted Fund Estimate and Project Recommendations. And we're hearing a report from Jenny Chan.
Yes, good morning, Chair White and committee members. I have a PowerPoint presentation today. So the State Transportation Improvement Program, known as STIP, administered by the California Transportation Commission, is adopted biannually. The last STIP was the 2020 STIP, which commenced relevant work in 2019. Now it's time to prepare the 2022 STIP. The first action that is taken in the new STIP cycle is Caltrans presents the STIP fund estimate, which lays out the STIP funding available in the next cycle and in what years the funds are anticipated to be available. Simultaneously, the CTC begins updating the STIP program guidelines. The STIP is comprised of public transportation account and state highway account funds that are available for state highway improvements, intercity rail, and regional highway and transit improvements. Next slide. The 2022 STIP consists of fiscal year 22-23 through 26-27, but programming capacity is not available until fiscal year 25-26 and 26-27. The final STIP estimate for 2022 was adopted in August. The STIP fund estimate indicates total new capacity of $808 million statewide, available starting in fiscal year 25-26. STIP funding is split 25% to Caltrans and 75% to regions. The 75% regional share is distributed by formula, 75% population and 25% state highway lane miles. Riverside County is expected to receive $36 million of STIP regional funds, also available starting in fiscal year 25-26. Based on a memorandum of understanding approved by this commission in 1998, new STIP capacity coming to Riverside County will be distributed based on sales tax revenues in each geographic area of the county. Each county's 2022 STIP must be submitted to the CTC by December 15, 2021. The 2022 STIP will be adopted by CTC at its March 23rd meeting in 2022. Next slide. This table illustrates the STIP share amounts for the last 7 STIP cycles, as well as the upcoming 2022 STIP cycle, which is the subject of today's agenda item. As you can see, the STIP has varied significantly over the years. With the passage of SB 1 in 2017, it stabilized STIP funding. In the 2020 STIP cycle, it was thought that the 2022 STIP would be much healthier. That was before the coronavirus existed. A decrease in gasoline consumption impacted STIP revenues for the upcoming cycle. The good news is the 2022 STIP fund estimate is neither zero nor negative as it has been in recent years. In fact, since SB 1, we have seen steady growth in each cycle. Next slide. Based on the sales tax data in Riverside County, Western County's 2022 STIP distribution is 78.14%. The Coachella Valley's is 21.42%, and Palo Verde Valley is 0.44%. Based on the adopted STIP fund estimate, Riverside County's new STIP capacity will be $35,968,000, and following the sales tax revenue shares for each geographic area, Western County will have approximately $27.5 million, Coachella Valley will have $7.5 million, and Palo Verde Valley will have $155,000 of STIP funding to program. The $719,360 you see for planning, programming, and monitoring, or PPM, is an off-the-top amount of STIP funds county can use to prepare project study reports for capital projects, develop planning documents, contribute to staff time, and other administrative expenses. The state STIP guidelines allow counties to utilize up to 5% of their STIP shares for PPM, but the commission's policy is to only use 2%. Next slide. Per an MOU between the commission and Blythe, Palo Verde Valley STIP funds have been traded with Measure A Western Riverside County Highway funds to facilitate delivery of local arterial projects in the Palo Verde Valley. Given Blythe's small staff, lower STIP funding levels, and focus on local arterials, it is more efficient to provide local funding to ensure project delivery and a less cumbersome allocation process. Staff recommends amending the STIP MOU with Blythe, trading $155,094 of STIP funds with Measure A Western Riverside County Highway funds. As a result, project recommendations for 2022 STIP Western Riverside County total $27,698,381. Next slide. Projects programmed in the STIP must meet a few requirements. To name a couple, having a completed project study report or equivalent and being fully funded. A thorough review of commission-sponsored projects was performed to identify projects for 2022 STIP programming. Due to the relatively small amount of STIP funding and not being available for programming until at least fiscal year 25-26, no commission-sponsored projects that meet the criteria were identified. Staff is recommending programming the funds to 2 regionally significant, well-qualified projects. The first is I-10 Highland Springs Interchange in Banning and Beaumont. As has been mentioned by commissioners at a number of committee and commission meetings over the past couple of years, I-10 is seeing increased congestion and significant residential development. This interchange is part of the settlement agreement between Beaumont and WRCOG. RCTC agreed to be the lead on this regionally significant project in both Banning and Beaumont. The environmental phase will be getting underway soon, and there is significant TUMF programming capacity available on this project to get it to construction in fiscal year 26-27. The second Western County STIP project recommendation is for the next segment of Temescal Canyon Road widening in the El Cerrito area of unincorporated Riverside County. Temescal Canyon Road has long been a priority for the region as it is the only alternative route to Interstate 15 in the Corona area. The commission has coordinated with Riverside County on previous segments of this facility, which has since been constructed. As the County Transportation Department heads into the environmental phase and final design of the project, it is anticipated to be construction ready in fiscal year 26-27 as well. Next slide. The Coachella Valley Association of Governments is responsible for nominating STIP projects in the Coachella Valley. At its executive committee meeting this afternoon, it is anticipated CVAG will approve programming the Coachella Valley STIP share of $7.5 million on the I-10 Monroe Street interchange, CVAG's highest priority project based on its transportation project prioritization study. Next slide. As previously mentioned, the Commission's policy is to limit the PPM set aside to 2%. These funds will be programmed across fiscal years 24-25 through 26-27. Additionally, Riverside County still has STIP projects programmed in the 2020 STIP that were approved by the Commission in 2019. These important ongoing projects are due to be allocated by the CTC this year and next year. Carryover projects include Temecula's I-15 French Valley Parkway interchange, the Commission's 7191 interchange, and CVAG's regional signal synchronization phase 2 project. Next slide. Each year that there is a positive STIP, there is an opportunity to program and advance funds from the 6th year of the STIP via the maximum share. In the case of the 2022 STIP, the 6th year is fiscal year 27-28. The delta between Riverside County's maximum share and the target share, which I just detailed the programming recommendations for in the previous slides, is $15.9 million. After accounting for the 2% PPM set aside, $15.6 million remain and may be available to program and potentially advance to earlier years. In the past, staff typically has not recommended going after the maximum share and instead waits for the next STIP cycle when there is more certainty to program these shares that are so far out. Next slide. This STIP cycle is an exception. Staff is recommending programming the maximum share amount of $15.6 million for the Tier 2 environmental document on the Coachella Valley San Gregorio Pass Rail Corridor Service Project, better known as CV Rail. While the maximum share is not available until fiscal year 27-28, staff will be requesting the $15.6 million be programmed in fiscal year 23-24 when other funds for the project may be available. The state now has an opportunity to come to the table with funding for this priority project since the Commission funded the Tier 1 environmental document. In addition to requesting Caltrans to program $10 million of its STIP funding on this project, staff is pursuing other state and federal funds to complete the funding plan for Tier 2. For full transparency, I need to emphasize there is a chance the state will not have capacity to program the maximum share, in which case staff will bring an item back to the Commission after the 2022 STIP is adopted next year in March. Next slide. This table identifies the carryover projects I mentioned previously and illustrates staff's recommendations that are the subject of this item. Next slide. Once approved by the Commission, staff will prepare and submit the 2022 STIP to the CTC by the December 15th deadline and initiate the Blythe STIP Fund Trade MOU to swap the Palo Verde Valley STIP share for local Measure A funds upon CTC approval of the 2022 STIP. Next slide. In summary, staff is recommending the committee approve the various programming actions identified in the staff report and summarized on this slide. Next slide. In total, there are 10 staff recommendations for your consideration, including forwarding this item to the commission for final approval. Next slide. Thank you for your time this morning. I'm joined by the project managers for each of the projects being recommended to receive STIP funding. We are available to answer any questions you have. But before that, I'd like to turn it over to Anne for some additional remarks.
Hey, thank you, Jenny. Good morning, commissioners. I just wanted to emphasize the points Jenny made regarding our attempt at seeking the maximum share for Riverside County. Based on your priority for Coachella Valley San Gorgonio Rail Project, the fact that the Tier 1 environmental document should be completed within the coming months, we are taking a very aggressive approach to seeking all of the funding needed for Tier 2. It's a very expensive environmental document. It's over $50 million for that environmental document for that project. But we are taking the approach that if we demonstrate that the commission is seeking additional funding out of its regional share, Caltrans rail staff has indicated their support for putting the project in the interregional share, which is the Caltrans share of the STIP. We've spoken with the state agency to talk about how we might compete for funds there. We're also looking at federal funds. So we're basically going all out in trying to get the additional funding from our state and federal partners on Coachella Valley Rail. So stay tuned. This is the first step. A more than $15 million request is a very good start. Not sure if our aggressive approach will work, but we're going to put our best efforts towards seeking all of the additional funding, which is why we are recommending, for the first time that I can recall, that we go after our maximum share in the STIP and make our best effort to get that money for that project. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Supervisor Spiegel, I see you have your hand raised.
Well, I was just going to say that I'm excited about the rail project, Coachella. That's been long overdue. We've been working on that for a very long time. Also talk about that regularly now in Metrolink. It's been an ongoing conversation in Metrolink. And the Temescal Valley expansion is not only for the Corona area, it's also going southbound into the District 2 into Temescal Valley and all the way down to Lake Elsinore. It is the only other point of transportation down between the two areas. So it really covers an awful lot. It is an extension of the already done from the south. We're just going to connect the extensions from the north, south, and have that middle gap that is sorely needed. Great projects. I am so excited. I'm very glad we're taking an aggressive approach because I think the rail project certainly should have some support from both federal and state because they see this as a viable and very needed project. So when the time's appropriate, I certainly want to make the motion.
Thank you. Commissioner Harnick, you're up next.
Thank you so much. Just great big thank yous on this. And thank you to RCTC for taking such a thoughtful approach to all these projects and the allocation. And if ever there was a time to go a little more aggressive and get the max amount, I'm glad to see we're doing it now. And I'm glad to see that the Coachella Valley and really all of Riverside County and beyond would benefit with moving that rail project forward. So thank you so much. And this is exciting.
Thank you. Commissioner Middleton, you're up.
All right, this will be quick. I agree with everything that Karen and Jan said, and it's so important. This is a generational project for our entire region, and we need to aggressively go after it. And my thanks to Anne and her team.
Thank you. Do we have any other commissioners wishing to speak on this issue? I don't see any other hands raised.
So I move all recommended items.
Oh, Palm Desert will second.
And we'll take a roll call, please.
District 2,
Absolutely, yes.
District 3,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Ella Mesa,
Fantastic, yes.
Canyon Lake,
Aye.
Cathedral City,
An emphatic yes.
Coachella, Coachella.
I think she froze.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, there she is.
Yes.
Thank you. Desert Hot Springs,
Aye.
Lake Elsinore,
Aye.
Palm Desert,
Yes.
Palm Springs,
Aye.
San Jacinto,
Aye.
Wildemar.
Yes.
Thank you. That item does pass.
Thank you. We had no items pulled from the consent calendar, so we'll move on to the executive director's report. Ann, did you have some comments you wanted to make?
Just very briefly, commissioners, last month at the B&I committee and then also this month at the commission meeting, you approved the plan of refinance. So I'm happy, fingers crossed, to tell you we are still on track for that bond sale next week. So the 4th and the 5th, the 5th will be the actual sale. We are in the tender and exchange period right now for existing bondholders. So that is underway. And Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that closes on Thursday at close of business. So the process is underway and things are still looking good for our refinancing next week. We will we'll let you know as soon as we have details. I'll send out an email to all commissioners, but this is pretty exciting. Things seem to be looking pretty good. So fingers crossed. We have 8 more days to go to the bond sale, but it's looking good so far. And we'll have some early indications related to the tender and exchange later on this week. So still a go. We'll keep you posted.
Thank you. Now we'll move to commissioner comments. This item provides the opportunity for brief announcements or comments on items or matters of general interest. Is there anyone who wishes to comment? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. So I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 10:02. And our next meeting will be held 9:30 a.m. October 25th. And we'll see you all then.
Thank you.
You have a good week.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Bye.